And hello good people of the internet, it is I, Tommy Kelly, and this is Adventures in Woo Woo. In this episode, I want to talk a bit about the whole notion of fire and forget, or that kind of idea that you have to immediately forget or not think about the magic you have just done something for, like a sigil or a ritual or whatever it is. But first of all, I want to address something that I said yesterday, which is the framing of me in these videos. I had suspected that my kind of 90% coverage of my sensor would mean blah blah blah, tech talk, that if I left less room at the top on the preview screen, then it would kind of balance out, which didn't really work yesterday. But what I think the problem is that when I press record, these kind of, like bars drop in on the preview screen. But I don't think that's a representation of what the actual video comes out. So I'm trying something new today and hopefully it'll work out. It's extremely warm here today, so I am definitely going to be sweating in this video because it's noisy outside. There's people outside, people doing things. And I have to close the windows, but even if the windows were open, I'd still probably sweating because it is quite warm. Anyway, that's the daily update on the weather. In this video, what I want to just talk about this whole notion of trying to forget the magic that you've just done, and they're just kind of, it's lust for result is one name it's called, but it's called many different things. But it's like, do a sigil and then forget what the sigil is for and never think about it again. Now, I have a couple of issues with that. One, it doesn't really work for me, because it's very hard to forget about something that you want. If you want something big enough or bad enough, or have some sort of necessity for it, that you are going to do magic for it, it's very hard then to forget about it. If, say, you're doing a sigil to get rent paid or mortgage paid or some sort of emergency type magic, it's very hard then to forget about it because you still have that looming deadline of the thing that needs to be paid. So I tend to see that kind of fire and forget more in a reality transurfing type of way, which is to reduce the importance on it. I think the initial kind of idea came from the whole thing of just trying not to obsess about it. Don't be thinking too much about, is it manifesting, is it working, is it doing it, so that you kind of, talk yourself out of the whole thing, which I think is also part of don't talk, to anyone else about it, like that whole keep silent thing. Because you could be all riled up or boosted up and feeling good about your magic, whatever, and then you mention it to someone and they go, do you actually believe that? And that destroys the whole kind of energy of it. Another thing that just kind of dissipates the energy I have found, particularly in creative work, so I have to assume it's the same with magic, is that when you talk about something, when you explain what it is, say I started talking about the exact story of my comic, or I was talking about a song that I'm hoping to write, or whatever it is the thing. By saying it kind of out loud, in a sense, it becomes materialized. The energy dissipates because it has got some sort of release, or it's got some sort of home. Not the home you wanted it to be. You wanted it to be a complete kind of, in a sense, a product, a complete thing of a comic, a book, a song, whatever it is. But now it has become a conversation, and that's the outlet it has been. And you kind of have to then rebuild up the energy again to get back into it. Not all the time, I've found. It's mostly in the early stages of it, before you've actually started. So if I started talking about what the story was of my new comic now, I think that would have a negative effect on my ability to actually then go ahead and do it. So I feel the same kind of way about magic. Not only can you have an adverse reaction from someone kind of, said this is ridiculous, or whatever the reaction is, and that can knock your energy, but you can also dissipate the energy of the magic because it has become manifest, just not in the way you want it. It has become real. It's come down from idea space into this physical world through a conversation. So my kind of thing is when I'm doing sigils, or when I'm doing any kind of magic, it's mostly sigils, that's what I do. Well, actually my main magic is probably intentional magic, where I'll kind of have an intention and then a kind of a visualization. But sigils are hugely incorporated in my way of doing things. And I don't get too obsessed about, not knowing what the individual sigil is for, or whether I remember or not. So if I have a shoal is just doing 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever it is, a number of sigils together that are kind of, in some sense, energetically linked, although they probably don't have to be. That's kind of the way I work, with an idea of a robo-fish in it. This all comes from Gordon White's work, and it's really, really good. This whole sigil stuff is excellent. Where in this series of sigils that you have part of a shoal, you do a thing called a robo-fish, which is a sigil for a desire that is definitely going to happen, with the kind of idea that kickstarts the rest, and because it kind of looks and goes, oh, well, if that works, then all of these have to work, all of these have to manifest. So you deliberately pick one that you're definitely going to do and make it. You know, like I'm going to make coffee, I'm going to drink coffee, I'm going to drive my car, I'm going to meet my friend, I'm going to have pasta for dinner, or something that you definitely are going to do that then kickstarts the rest of the show. And I try to do something that's kind of related to the overall theme of whatever my show is, but not always. But it seems to work better, even if that's just in my head, if I do that. But I tend to do them really, really quickly, where so I'll have my statements of intent, get them into sigils, drawn, bang, on the card or whatever I'm doing, so that by the end of the show, I'm not 100% sure of which actual sigil is for what intention. I still have a kind of an idea of what the overall thing was, because I like to know when my magic has worked, and I think to have a kind of a clarity around what your kind of outcome looks like is important, at least for me, because then I know, well, this worked. It's not kind of a hazy, didn't it work? Like if you did a sigil for more money and then you find 10 cent and you go, well, that's more money. Is that the sigil, you know, complete? Is that the whole thing? So the more kind of thought you spend thinking about how will I know when this has worked, I think the more likely it is to get closer to your actual desired outcome than just some sort of vague 10 cent for more money outcome. So I'm not too concerned about completely forgetting at all about what the sigils are for. But as I say, I do have them where the show itself, that the individual sigils I may be hazy about. Not always too. Sometimes you can't unsee a sigil and you know exactly what it's about. So once I then activate them, I try as best as possible in that reality transurfing thing of reduce the importance on it. It's kind of like Austin Osman Spar's thing of need not matter, need not be. You know, you just kind of allow don't get compulsive with it, don't get, it's like don't watch the kettle when it's trying to boil because it'll never boil, and that whole thing of you'll start talking yourself out of it, all of these things. If you reduce the importance so that it's not that big of a deal, you tend not to think too much about it, and it seems to allow it to manifest a bit more. In a reality transurfing frame of things, it would be because the balancing forces don't see it as a big deal, so don't try to have a snapback about you trying to change the universe. So I would suggest when it comes to lust to result or fire and forget and all of these things, don't obsess too much. Just try your best not to think about it in the same way you shouldn't overthink about anything you're trying to do. If I overthought a drawing, I'm definitely going to ruin it. Or if you overthink guitar solo when you're in the middle of it, you're definitely going to forget it, or you're going to make something, some sort of mistake or some sort of some sort of error when you're over analyzing it or overthinking it. If you're sitting there and you're playing a guitar solo, whatever it is, playing a chord, and you're going, oh, what's next? You're missing the point of playing music, and it just becomes a technical thing that you probably are going to fuck up. But if you're just going to feel it and you just go with it and flow and don't worry too much about it, and just know that the next chord is going to come, or it's not, and that's just the way it is, there's a better flow to it and everything seems to work better. So if it is a case that you've done a sigil and then you just can't get it out of your head, don't panic, don't worry about it. Try not to do it, but if it does happen, it's okay. You don't have to feel that it's not going to happen, or it's you've somehow ruined it or whatever. Just relax, reduce the importance again. Just think it doesn't really matter too much. It'll work out or it won't, and then something else will happen. And just try to get yourself in the frame of mind that it's not that big of a deal. And that has stood me well. Now, of course, not every sigil has worked. And not every magic I want has worked out the way I wanted it exactly, or even worked at all. But so there's no guarantees in magic, so even with all of these kind of tips and tricks. But if you have some tips or tricks from me on how you get around the whole idea of lust or result or reducing the importance, or whatever it is that you kind of look at it, what you feel you have to do after you've said your intention out into the world, please let me know. And leave it in the comments below or in the social media or any of these places where I am. So, good people of the internet, until our next adventure, may all of your sigils be totally forgotten as soon as you make them, until they become manifest, and then you remember them in the totality. And may our best days be ahead. Be well.